I never believed in ghosts, and even though I had been working as a night security guard at Brookwell Corporation for the past 6 months, where rumors of strange noises, flickering lights, and unexplained disappearances had been passed around among employees, I had always dismissed them as mere stories meant to scare new hires until one night when I realized that some stories were terrifyingly true. The office building stood eerily silent, bathed in the dim glow of emergency exit signs, and as I moved through the empty corridors with my flashlight casting long shadows against the walls, I reminded myself that my shift was always routine, consisting of patrolling the halls, checking the security cameras, and reporting anything unusual. But lately, something had felt undeniably different. As if an unseen presence had begun lurking within the building, watching me from just beyond the edges of the darkness. It had started the previous week when I had been walking past the break room and suddenly heard whispers, soft, faint, but distinct enough to make me stop in my tracks. I cautiously stepped inside, expecting to find someone there, but to my unease, the room was completely empty except for the microwave, which was inexplicably turned on, its timer ticking down from 6 seconds, counting towards 0 even though no one had been there to set it in motion. Now, as I patrolled the 8th floor, the air felt unnaturally heavy, thick with an almost suffocating stillness, and just as I turned a corner, I heard a new sound, one that sent a chill through my spine, a rhythmic tapping noise, deliberate and measured, like fingers drumming against a desk, which led me straight to Office 8B, where a dim light flickered unnaturally from within, casting eerie shadows through the frosted glass pane on the door. "Brookwell Security, anyone there?" I called out, knocking firmly against the wooden surface, and when no one answered, I hesitated for a moment before testing the handle, surprised to find it unlocked. With slow, cautious movements, I pushed the door open and stepped inside, only to find the office completely empty except for a single computer screen glowing in the darkness, displaying nothing but static that pulsed and flickered as though it were alive. I felt a creeping unease settle in my stomach as I stared at the screen, and just as I was about to turn away, the static on the monitor suddenly shifted, morphing into something disturbingly precise, as words began typing out in real time, appearing letter by letter as though someone invisible was sitting there at the keyboard, deliberately crafting a message meant solely for me. "Why didn't you leave?" A cold wave of dread washed over me as the screen abruptly blinked off, plunging the room into deeper darkness, and before I could fully process what had just happened, the silence was shattered by the shrill, piercing sound of a ringing phone, making me jolt in alarm. But what truly made my blood run cold was when I realized the sound wasn't coming from the desk phone, it was coming from somewhere much closer. From the far side of the room where the closet doors stood slightly ajar. With every nerve in my body screaming at me to get out, I turned toward the closet, my breath hitching as I saw the faintest movement from within, just a shadow shifting in the narrow gap between the doors, and at that moment, sheer terror took over as I bolted out of the office, running down the hallway without looking back, my only thought being to get to the security room, to find some kind of explanation, to prove to myself that what I had just seen wasn't REA. Heart pounding, I burst into the security office and frantically switched on the surveillance monitors, scanning through the different camera feeds, hoping for reassurance that I was simply imagining things, but instead, my stomach twisted in horror as one of the screens displayed an image that made my breath catch, a man in a dark suit standing in the 6th floor hallway, completely motionless. His face oddly blurred as if the camera refused to focus on it, and I instinctively switched angles, desperately trying to get a clearer look, but when I returned to the original feed, the man was gone. As a heavy silence filled the room, my gut told me to leave, to walk out of the building and never look back, but before I could act, movement on another screen made my entire body tense. The elevator was rising, floor by floor, heading straight for the 8th floor, heading straight for me, and as my breath grew shallow, I listened in frozen horror as the faint ding of the elevator echoed down the empty hall just beyond the security office doors. I stood still, gripping the edge of the desk with white-knuckled hands, unable to shake the overwhelming feeling that something was coming, and when the doors finally slid open, my worst fears were confirmed as a man stepped out, dressed in a dark suit identical to the one I had seen on the monitor, but as my eyes focused on the figure, my breath caught in my throat in absolute terror because I knew this man. His name was Daniel. The night guard who had gone missing 6 months ago, the same man whose disappearance had fueled the eerie rumors that I had always dismissed as nothing more than ghost stories. Something was horribly wrong, because while the man's body seemed normal, his head was tilted at an unnatural angle, as if his neck had been violently twisted, and his eyes, wide, hollow, and utterly devoid of life, were locked directly on me, unblinking and watching. The overhead lights flickered violently, casting the entire corridor into a strobe-like nightmare, and just as I forced myself to step back, preparing to run, Daniel moved. Not walked, glided, silent, effortless, unnatural. I didn't think, I simply turned and ran. My feet pounded against the floor as I sprinted toward the emergency stairwell, shoving open the heavy metal door and rushing downward, barely noticing the way the temperature seemed to drop with each step, as if I were descending into something much colder, much darker than just a basement, and by the time I reached the lowest level, my mind was screaming at me to escape, to leave and never return. Slamming the basement door behind me, I fumbled with the lock, my trembling hands making it difficult to secure, and as I reached for my radio to call for help, all I got in return was static, but beneath the garbled white noise, a distorted voice whispered directly into my ear, a voice that was neither human nor mechanical, cold and hollow, whispering, "You shouldn't have come here." Then, the basement lights went out. I froze, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps, and just as I reached for my flashlight, I realized with growing dread that it had died too. Then, from the pitch-black darkness, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed through the room. Soft, slow, coming closer. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering, every fiber of my being telling me to run, but then, just inches from my ear, I heard a whisper so close, it felt like breath against my skin. "Leave." A cold hand, bony, ice-cold fingers, clamped around my wrist. I screamed. I didn't remember how I got to the lobby, nor did I recall unlocking the front doors, yet when I stumbled outside into the cold night air, they were inexplicably wide open, as if something had let me go. But before I could fully comprehend what had happened, my phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I shakily pulled it out, I saw a single text message from an unknown number. "Don't come back." I never returned to Brookwell Corporation, and 2 weeks later, the company hired a new night guard to replace me. But a month after that, security footage leaked online, showing the final moments of that new guard's last shift, and in the footage, right before the screen cut to static, a man in a dark suit could be seen standing behind him, whispering something into his ear. That new guard was never found.